gun control. And
I'm on the negative.
I was just about to ask since you're on the way, but are you on the
You're on the negative?
Yes.
You need to speak second.
okay. And Miss Brown, you are on the positive?
Yep.
Can I take notes from
Just like that?
for the crossfire? How about piece of paper to take notes for the crossfire?
I'll probably be leaving in the middle of this, so I apologize early for my absence.
That's all good. I've heard people say that more guns equals less violence. I wanted to be fair, so I went to see if that was true or not. Research has found that higher rates of U.S. household firearms ownership are associated with higher rates of gun suicide and gun accidents. Mass shootings have also begun to skyrocket, though criminologists cannot disclose why. Reading this, it's no wonder I'm a gun control advocate. I know Americans don't like change. I know the NRA wants to maintain its profits, and I know that America has been bloated on propaganda that it's to defend the Second Amendment. Do you honestly think, though, that our founding fathers, in their powdered wigs and pantaloons, meant that U.S. citizens should be storing Uzis and assault rifles specifically meant for mass murder? They were just out of a revolution when that was written. It was written to defend citizens against their prior mother country, to counter the repression they'd experienced under colonial Britain. They had slow rifles with single, barely damaging musket balls. That was their experience with weapons. That's what they envisioned as arms that we would have today. Do you think if they were brought back that they would stand there and allow America to tear itself inside out with guns that can shoot dozens of bullets per second? It's not the Second Amendment that intended this, but that's the bail for it. For everyone who's screaming, they want to take my hunting rifle. No, we don't. I want to eliminate human deaths, and I'm pretty sure you can keep your rifle to hunt for that to happen. No one needs an Uzi to shoot a deer. There'd be nothing left to eat. Yeah, like I said, I know we don't like change, but change is necessary to grow. We are a strong country, but I'm afraid that if we remain stagnated in this law, we are taking our first steps towards destruction. Obviously, there's no way to completely abolish guns overnight, but there are limits we can introduce to restrict those who get guns, what we use them for, and when guns are appropriate. Firstly, automatic and semi-automatics should be bought back, and if not, rounded up and distributed to people who have a legitimate use for them, aka the military. Background checks are second. If people want to buy a weapon, they'll have to comply to background checks. Health, physical, criminal, and mental information would be submitted and viewed. Certain qualifications would be set to prevent anyone mentally disturbed from having a gun they can play shoot-'em-up games with. If people have nothing to hide, they won't have to be anxious. If we have to meet qualifications to drive a car, why doesn't it make sense to enforce rules for a gun? Thirdly, once a gun was obtained, people would have to undergo a gun course for usage. There's no point in having a gun if you can't actually use it to defend yourself, like so many people say that that's what they want it for. So arm up teachers and citizens yearning for a pistol, but that means you're required to sacrifice some time and money for the privilege. Did you know that James Holmes, the quote-quote joker of the Aurora, Colorado mass shooting, bought everything offline, legally and anonymously? His assault rifle, his bulletproof vest, the bombs in his apartment, all legal, all easily done. 99.6% of rifles sold are sold legally by vendors of the NRA that are used in mass shootings. Preventative measures aren't a bad thing. They're a safe thing. They're a necessary precaution, a reform, a change that we need. Guns have contributed to a horrible amount of national sorrow. Look me in the eye. Imagine your little brother or sister who you were just dropping off at school happily to enjoy primary learning with their friends. Imagine that. Now imagine if they attended Sandy Hook in Newtown, Connecticut. Imagine if they were lined up like helpless animals, shakily complying to some insane man in his 20s with an assault rifle who happened to have just murdered his mother who, in owning a private collection of assault rifles, led to her death. Now picture them, their eyes wide as saucers with fear, as all Adam Lanza had to do was hold the trigger steady as their 6- and 7-year-old friends crumple to the floor like rag dolls, riddled with bullets and demonstrating your brother or sister's fate. In 1 second, the entire room is smeared in blood and dead bodies. Dead bodies that should have been alive right now, sitting at home and trying to sneak cookies from the pantry. The gun did that. There is no way around the fact that Adam Lanza wouldn't have even made it into the classroom without that rifle. And yet, with all the crying families, with all the continued assaults, the National Rifle Association and all its government lobbyists ignore them. Not because they care about our so-called right to bear arms. They aren't representing the Second Amendment at all. They're ensuring their profits. It's not about national security. It's about their money's security. There are a lot of paranoid, ignorant people in the U.S., if you haven't noticed. And why not take advantage of them if you've got an archaic amendment that technically could apply to selling these things? Vendors check nothing and care about nothing but money. Australia, however, imposed gun control laws in 1996. They restricted the size and clips of rifles and handguns, established a buyback program, and had most of the intense firearms banned. Australian crime statistics showed a marked decrease in homicides since the gun law change. According to the Australian Institute of Criminology, the number of homicides in Australia has declined since 1999 to the lowest number on record in 2007, the most recent year for which official figures are available. What if we could just try? Look at the boy who took his father's gun to school, just to show it off to his friends. And suddenly it misfires, kills a girl, his friend. The girl's father then commits suicide from the heartbreak, and the boy, who didn't even mean to cause any harm whatsoever, who didn't mean to follow the guns don't kill people, people kill people rule. Now he's a wreck of guilt. Guilt that should have never been there had it not been for the gun that he took. The guns. The guns. What if we could just try? Don't look at this like a you versus me on gun control. Listen with your heart. Can't you hear the lives that are saved if you are open about preventing their deaths? What if someone said that you had the power to make a difference? Wouldn't you capitalize? What if we could just try? Try to compromise. Try to restrict such decisive weapons. So many accidents happen. So many suicides. So many intentional crazy shootings. We may be looking for terrorists on the outside, but the true terrorists sit right in our own country, in our own hands.
It was a little before, so I'll give you that much time. Good.
On the negative?
This is now the negative position, yes.
Hi everyone. As you can see, the people who are pro-gun grabbing, they often appeal with emotions, as my opponent just did, using words such as "look me in the eye," saying the same word 3 times, saying "think with your heart." They don't look at facts at all. So with that, we can say that the other side just uses emotions, and they're playing it, and they often use emotions such as tragedies like this that has happened in Sandy Hook or Aurora, and they use it to limit guns and limit people's rights, just like they do in Australia and Great Britain, as you can see. So with that being said, we can look at Chicago, which has the highest amount of murders every year for the United States, but they have the strictest gun laws. As well as we can look at Anchorage, Alaska, where they have a population of 300,000 people, and there were a total of 8 gun crimes last year out of 300,000 people, and all 8 of those crimes were for recently registered criminals. So making the total population for gun violence 0 for citizens in Anchorage, Alaska. Now, as far as mass killings go, serial killings, every mass killing that has occurred in the past 50 years, which is over 4 people, a mass killing has occurred in an area where guns are not allowed. Gun-free zone, Aurora, Columbine, Sandy Hook, there are guns were not allowed. So you can basically see how many lives would have been saved if there was guns. And government bureaucracies, the government wants to put limits on people with their guns, they can't calculate how many times basically people draw their weapons to stop the shooter, just like they did the same weekend at Sandy Hook, where a shooter in Oregon was stopped after killing 1 person or injuring 1 person, and somebody drew their gun on him. So he stopped and he took his life, as it should be. So we can see that as far as registering and background checks go, registering for most cases leads to confiscation, as you see in Great Britain, Ireland, Greece, Bahamas, and you can see that with these cases, the registering guns, there's no right of the government to limit people's the amount of weapons they can use or restricting them on certain accounts just because the criminals are going to do it. Like I said, with registering and background checks, as far as background checks goes, there's no data at all that says that background checks reduce gun violence because there's no applicable data there, as gun violence has been going down since 1991 before the Brady Bill was introduced with the background checks. So we can say that the limiting people's rights does not have anything to do with gun violence whatsoever. As far as the government goes, we can see how quickly martial law was enacted in Boston, where people were cowering under their beds in a city, Boston, where what are they using? Pots and pans, bats to protect themselves against the terrorist who was on the loose, who was caught by a citizen, actually. And why is the government about 1.9 billion rounds of ammo? Well, they're obviously limiting the amount of ammo we can buy by buying up all the ammo stockpiles, and they've also bought 7,500 street-ready tanks. So look how quickly martial law can be enacted in the United States. So are these gun grabbers a bunch of people who think alike, warm-hearted, appealing emotionally, a bunch of angelic zealots, basically going against people who own the guns, the evildoers, the devils? Because we can all agree that Pol Pot, Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Castro, ad infinitum, ad nauseum, they all agree that gun control works. Thank you.
Okay, and at this point, I hate to use the term crossfire, but that's what it's called, so.
I'll start it off. You made a point about the automatic weapons, that they should be confiscated. Well, there are no automatic weapons allowed in the United States. It's illegal by the Firearm Act of 1937, I believe, by FDR. So they're really semi-automatic. And the reason for background checks and weapons, the background checks, the criminals are going to get their guns no matter what. So the people who are protecting themselves and their families from the droves of illegal aliens that come over their backyards, just like in Mexico, or the gangs that come across the yards in Chicago, just like there was 5 gangsters that came through the yards of Chicago, and people cannot shoot by limiting their amount of magazines. And also the founding fathers, remember the founding fathers, they obviously knew that the guns were evolving because in the early 1800s, that's when the first automatic weapons were being produced. Obviously with cannons and all that, they obviously did not want people to have cannons in their yards. So that's why they made the Second Amendment portable. So it's basically firearms you can have with their own self on their person. And the last point I want to touch up on is obviously sacrifice. They should not sacrifice anything to the government to protect their own rights, as that's in the Bill of Rights, because our founding fathers knew what's best for us. And we went without background checks for how many years? 217 years without background checks, so there's no reason to institute it, as the mass shootings have just gone up with all the gun-free zones. And just the last point, as far as Australia goes, you mentioned Australia, how the homicides have gone down. Well, violent crimes have gone, I think, up. They've gone up 5 times, according to the Cato Institute. So, as far as gun grabbing goes and violence, every country that's taken away the guns, such as Britain, their violent crimes are through the roof. And as far as homicides and guns and daggers, as you see in China, there's 23 people killed who were stabbed to death.